Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar organized by JetBrains. I'm Paul Everett, JetBrains Developer Advocate. I'll be your host. I need a haircut, but I do have on my webinar shirt, and I've got two good people joining me. The topic for today's webinar is a refresher on Django tips in PyCharm. Joining me today, friend of the show, friend of the webinar, friend of all of us in the world of Python, showrunner for Talk Python Training, host of the Talk Python to Me podcast, Michael Kennedy. Michael, it's early for you. Thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here. I always enjoy being on these webcasts with you, and such cool stuff you're doing. I'm, as you know, a huge fan of PyCharm, and so I'm excited to be part of it.
This is like webinar / podcast 5,000 for you. So appreciate you making time in your busy schedule for us. Also joining my colleague, Nafiel Islam. He'll be answering questions in chat, but he will join us in the second half of the demo to show something pretty cool. And this means I have, and this, they didn't know this was coming, so this is to embarrass both of them. I have the authors of both of the PyCharm books here with me on the webinar. This one from Nafiel.
Oh, that's ancient.
It's pretty old. I'll be donating it to the museum a little bit later. Nafiel, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's always good to be with you too.
And we rehearsed what we're doing. You'll be answering some questions, but this part is going to be pretty good. So all of you out there, you might have the temptation to go do something else. Don't until after you see Nafiel doing his thing. Then after that, you can take off. Michael, you're joining us because Talk Python Training launched its first Django course in August. Much of today's demo will use the repo from that. In a second, we'll talk a little bit about the course. But Michael, in general, how do you think Django is doing?
Well, I think Django it's one of the stalwarts, and people ask me if I want to get started in the web and Python. Django is often the first thing that they think of, that people reach for. There's so many little flowers blooming in the Python web space these days, maybe a little bit less so than when async and stuff first came out. But it seemed in those days, a couple of years ago, you would see a cool web framework like, oh, I want to use that. Oh, wait, it hasn't been, after 2 months, it's gone stale again. And if you want something that's been there, that has tons of libraries, that has lots of IDE support, Django's a really great option.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, there's a lot of cool new things that have come. Flask was the cool new thing for a while. Fast API is the cool, and people have this zero-sum mentality that if those things are cool, then Django must be uncool. Nafiel, you and I were talking a little bit about, you were personally really excited about Fast API, but you and I both, I think, are on the same sheet of music. There's still a lot of Django out there, right?
Absolutely. I think one of the greatest things when I first started with Django was how good the documentation was. And it's still really good. And to this day, you can pretty much find any problem that you stumble onto into Django. There's probably somebody who's asked a Stack Overflow question about it.
Yep.
So it can be very easy to debug.
That's a very good point. Maturity has its benefits. Hey, I like saying that as a man of a certain age. Maturity is a feature, not a bug. So today I'm going to show a lot of features about using PyCharm to the max in Django development. Michael and I will then talk about him a little bit, see his experience on some of these things. Then Nafiel and I will collaborate during a section on showing some of these features. And then kind of at the end, I'll show a lot of the neat things that have arrived in PyCharm since I last did this webinar, like 2.5 years ago or something. So there's a lot to do. Let's go ahead and jump in, go through some slides real quick.
Paul, before we move on, let me add one really quick thing that I think is notable for Django and the sort of where it is.
Sure, go ahead.
So, a lot of people were excited about things like Fast API and some of these thousand flower blooming type of frameworks that came and went for a second. I think the reason they were is because of async and await. because of types, because of a lot of the new modern Python features.
Yes.
And with Django 3.3.2, 4, 4.1, we now have Django supporting things like async and await on the Django ORM and on the views. And it's most recent Django is very much up there with a lot of those
Now, I
newer
will give you
frameworks.
the other side of that coin. People like the type hinting in Fast API, and Django's had a little bit of a challenge, I think, getting type hinting into its experience. Because, I mean, it was conceived
Absolutely.
50 decades before type hinting were even a thing in Python.
You can't adopt a feature that doesn't exist as a core part of your framework.
Indeed.
That's right.
Okay, so let's move on. We'd like to make this webinar as live and, as you can see, conversational as possible. So should you have any questions during the webinar, go ahead and ask them. We from the PyCharm team, including Nafil, will be answering them as they come up. When we take little segments, I'll try and take a look over in the comment and see if there's something for Michael and I to riff on. And we'll do those pauses probably 4 or 5 times. I'll go ahead and take two comments. Chris May, hello. Pavel, no Dockers, no containers in this webinar. Going too fast to go into Docker. Usually the most common question is this being recorded? Yes, it is being recorded. It's YouTube. It'll be available immediately, basically. Michael knows how to do this. He's done 100,000 Python Bytes live streams on this. But someone will ask the question in a few minutes in the chat, is this being recorded? Thus keeping my streak of 50 consecutive webinars where someone has asked that question. All right. I also want to go ahead and talk a little bit about Michael's course. Christopher Trudeau did the course for Talk Python training. Here it is on the screen. You can kind of see the URL just a little bit. Launched in August. Michael, tell us a little bit about the genesis of this course and what you wanted to accomplish.
Well, I think when you are a web developer, you have kind of two camps you live in. Do you build your websites out of little tiny building blocks where everything is bespoke, or do you reach for frameworks like Django where they've got an admin section and so on? And I kind of live on that smaller, fine-grained, bespoke side. So I was really excited to work with Christopher, who came along and said, hey, why don't you have a Django course? Like, well, I don't do enough Django to really to be here to present it. So he's such a great presenter and a good educator. And so
Yes.
I partnered with him to put together this course, and we really refined it. And the goal is sort of the 80% most likely thing you're going to do with Django. You're going to have a data-driven, tested backend. You probably want to customize and improve the backend admin section. You want to have users accounts, other types of authentication, uploading things like images to be part of almost a CMS type of experience. So as we're going to play with the repo, build out kind of a personal library with authors and books and relationships. So if you're looking to build a Django app with users and other related records back to them, this is a really, really great way to get started. So I think it's fantastic. We talked even a little bit about deployment.
It's comprehensive. It goes at what I found to be exactly the right pace. Christopher does a good job of the why as well as the what. And he's got that damn Michael Kennedy perfect voice where you just enjoy listening to the whole thing. So I highly encourage everyone to take a look at this course. To encourage you to look at it, we teamed with Michael to do a giveaway for this. We're going to give away some copies of that course along with some subscriptions to PyCharm. And maybe Nafil, maybe you could help us watch for questions in the channel, in the chat,
absolutely.
and see who's posting some good questions. The question about doing a Docker version of this webinar, that doesn't count. We'll get to Docker some other time. That'll be Nafil who will do that one. I just volunteered you to do that webinar. Let's keep these kind of on high performance tips for using PyCharm. We could consider Docker if we wanted to. Okay, with that said, we will go ahead and switch over to my screen and go through some high-speed tips for Django in PyCharm. I'm going to start the Michael Kennedy way. Michael likes to drag a folder on top of the PyCharm icon, and then I'll go ahead and do a little bit of setup, and then we'll get into some tips. But some of these setups are my way of working, so I thought I'd show them real quick. I've got the repo from Christopher, and I drag it. My trackpad does not drag. Ugh. All right, and of course, macOS opens it on the wrong screen. And here we are in PyCharm. It's already offered to do something for me. I will hold off and do that in just a second. So I'm in PyCharm. I'm in Light Theme. Sorry, it's better for presentations. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to make an interpreter. And also, I'm going to bring up Firefox real quick, make sure that I'm set here. As a reminder, here is the repo, or the course from Michael that I'm basing this off of. I also have a little bit of stuff from my tutorial, which is really the Django tutorial set up a little bit for PyCharm. So we're set up here. I'll go ahead and make the screen a little bit bigger. And I think the font size is fine. And the first thing I'm going to do is make an interpreter. My microphone's in the way. It's going to add a new local interpreter. I'm going to say a new one, and it knows that I already have a virtual environment here. So I'm going to let it go ahead and discover that virtual environment and add it as a PyCharm project interpreter. And it's already set up, and it is indexed and all that stuff. I'm going to go to my requirements.txt. And PyCharm's really nice. It's like, hey, I'll do all that work for you. Thank you, PyCharm. Go right ahead. So now I've got my requirements installed. And when my requirements are installed, in packages installed successfully and all that stuff like that, you'll find that PyCharm has done some things for Django for me automatically. It's detected Django support. The polarity of that's backwards. It should be like, yes, use. But anyway, it's using the Django test runner for template languages. It has detected Django as the template language, and it has set up a Django run configuration for me. I'm going to do a couple of other things and then get over to Michael. I like using black. We've got a really good formatter, but the world of Python also likes black. There is a plugin, a community plugin for black. I've been using it for several months. It works so well, I've forgotten I installed it. So if I go to plugins, you'll see that I have black installed. If I go to black connect, I have some configuration options. It's running the black daemon, and it knows that it's running. Let's see black in action. I'll go to views, and I will change that to a single quoted string. And let me go back to black connect. It hasn't currently, because I removed my project settings. It's not reformatting on PyCharm format. When I say reformat file, it's not currently doing it. When I save, it's not currently doing it. So if I tell PyCharm, and you'll see down at the bottom, I've got Presentation Assistant installed to show you what I'm typing. PyCharm's like, hey, I'm cool with single quotes. Well, you know who isn't cool with single quotes? Black ain't cool with single quotes. Now when I run it, it runs reformat through black. And if I would have instead done a save, every time I save something, it's going to run it through black. Michael, I'll stop there for a second before going to the next big thing. Is there anything about PyCharm and kind of IDE integration for Django that you find worth mentioning?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I share some of the folks in excitement in the comments here to learn about the black plugin. That's pretty epic.
Yeah.
Now, Phil, do you use that? Do you know about this one?
Yeah, I've used the Black Connect plugin before, but I think I stopped using it. I think a release ago, primarily because it didn't support 3.11 back then, and our formatter did.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I think I do love your formatter, but I think Black is an important thing for teams as well, because it
my
stops the
CI.
debate.
Yeah,
exactly.
and if I could
I use
rely
this
on
tool
the
and it doesn't.
I apologize. I've got my third monitor is currently covering the comments. So when we pause, if either of you see something that people are talking about, let's bring it up. Can you do that for me?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and just to go back to your question, Paul, I think both for beginners and for experts, it's really nice that you don't have to worry about how do I plug in Django into this tool? How do I plug in Django into PyCharm? That it just knows, oh, there's details about the database I can work with. There's a certain way in which you run the server. I've seen plenty of people who are really good developers, and they'll drop in and they're like, oh, I'm gonna go just run this in the terminal. It's like, but you could just run it in here or that.
Yes.
If it had that integration, like you wouldn't have this uncertainty. And so I mean, I definitely am such a fan of the style of working that PyCharm has, and the fact that you just drag and dropped a folder onto there and it said, I know what that is. Let me get you all set up. That's awesome.
And that's really what this webinar is going to be about, all those little places where Python or where PyCharm can accelerate you. I'm going to talk now about the new UI. It is in EAP1. I'm not using EAP. I'll show how you can turn it on in the released version. I consume my PyCharms through the JetBrains Toolbox app. And it has a bunch of cool features, like letting you install several of them side by side. So I've got the AP here and the professional here. It also has features that let you do things like install command line launchers. So you can say PyCharm space dot to open the current folder. And one of the things you get with the EAP is this new UI that we've been working on for years. JetBrains has worked so hard at really refining and listening and getting feedback and trying to do something that's less IDE-ish and less distracting. We're actually looking to do a webinar on this in a couple of weeks. So I'm going to switch to the new UI. And in the release version, I have to go to the registry and check this box. When I do, it's going to tell me to restart. And here I am in the new UI, and I will switch to the correct theme that I want to use. I can switch as I go through these. You'll see them pop up. I'll switch to IntelliJ Lite, and there I am. That's the new UI. Again, if you're interested in this, we're going to do a webinar on it. And a lot of the same themes are still there. Another thing that I have for this webinar is IPython is installed. What that means is when I do something like the Python console, I'm getting, where's my cursor? You see that I'm getting IPython for my prompt handling and stuff like that. Where does that come from? The Django console. Here's the docs page for it. It's actually the Python console in a Django project. So what that means is search for console. You'll see Python console preferences, but also Django console preferences. And it lets you do some things before you go into the console. So it's a really good interactive experience for using Django. There's also a tool for PyCharm, the manage.py tool. So you don't have to go to a terminal for that. And you get things like autocomplete. Like if I want to migrate the polls app, I'm getting autocomplete on it. Not just on the commands, but on the values in my Django project.
Wow, okay, that's awesome.
I'll do a quick pause. Either of you got anything?
I got a quick question. Just that's my own question. Then I see
Yep.
some interesting stuff out there. Is that available on things other than Django, like this IPython instead
Yes.
of just the standard Python REPL coming?
Good question. It is a Python console thing. So anywhere in PyCharm Community Edition or Professional Edition, if you launch our tool, the tool is the Python console, this guy right here. If you have IPython installed, you'll get IPython for your prompt.
Fantastic.
But that's not it. Like, you know, depending on what packages you have installed, PyCharm will kind of work with that. So if you have Django installed, you'll see some really cool things there as well. So I'm not going to spoil anything for you, Paul. I just, wanted to tell them.
That's exactly
we do have
right.
a question though.
Yeah.
The question is, what about tools like Pylint and others? And the answer to that is, like, if you want to integrate external tools, you absolutely can through run configuration, but there's also a Pylint plugin that you can install as well from the marketplace. So just wanted to get that out there.
Yep. Good point.
Yeah, and
there are ways like external tools
Kim was
to
also
go ahead. Sorry,
yeah, sorry.
Michael.
Kim was also asking a little bit about maybe like other plugins, more like not just linting. Some that I really like, the Pydantic one, and the Nginx one. If you work with Nginx files, those things are always
there's an
Nginx
plugin.
There is, and it's really good because I'll end up taking the website down if I get it wrong. And I'm like, oh no, there's not a whole lot of help.
This plugin is the all-time biggest one for us. The requirements TXT plugin.
Yeah,
because of this prompt. Okay, let's move on to tips. All right, I'm going to start with general tips on just PyCharm in general, real quick. I don't search for, I don't go looking in files. You see, I've got my files tool turned off. I forget files exist. Instead, I search for symbols. This is like action. Sorry. So, sorry, this one's in just a second. When I want to do something, I don't remember keystrokes because I'm a man of a certain age. Instead, if I want to put the tab placement to none, I just start typing. I do find action, and my hands just know what to do after that. So any action I want to do, instead of the key binding, I go through find action. I also like to disable, to reduce clutter by disabling tools. So for example, I will turn off the tool windows. And I do, as you can see, I do this a lot. Tab placement none, I turn off tabs. I'm a tabless person. And then when I want to split windows, I do that. Or unsplit.
So Paul, it strikes me as you're going through this here, you know, a lot of people who say, oh, I don't want like a huge heavyweight editor with all this stuff. They want an Emacs or a Vim type of experience. Like,
people, if I did a video with the thing on my screen, they'd be like, I thought you worked for PyCharm. All right. And then another one is jump to recent file, which I do a lot because it also allows speed typing, but it lets me go over to not just files, but tools. This is the actual way I run the terminal. I do find action, TER, enter. I've done it a trillion times. And then the one that is probably for me, the biggest one I like to try and educate people on is stop thinking about files, stop thinking about strings, think about symbols. We've indexed your freaking universe. We can quickly get you from here to there. So if I'm sitting in here, I'm like, I want to go to the index view. Do I really want to go open the project tool, go down to store, go down to open view, and then I open the file and I'm not on the symbol yet. I got to go to the symbol. Instead, I can say that, and I'm on the symbol. What did I do? I did navigate to symbol, and I started typing parts of the symbol, and it will jump directly to that. That has a lot of impact. Nafil and I talked about one yesterday where there was a symbol in the middle of a string because of our Django support. All right, speaking of which, let's go to installed apps. taking a look at these and what we were just talking about, these are symbols as well. So for example, and I will temporarily open this, you see I've got catalog, home, polls, primer, etc. So for primer, if I type X, PyCharm will be like, nope, I know that's a string, but this is in our Django support, and we're going to go look for directories that match that. And I'm going to tell you there's an unresolved reference. Well, what else can I do once it's a symbol? I can do things like autocomplete. We should always do autocomplete, never type things out ourselves. We could even do things like refactor rename. I'll call that X primer. And you'll see my directory over here got changed to X primer. All locations in my code that are looking for the symbol primer will change to X primer. And if I don't like that, undo will take that entire unit of work, including the file names and the get stuff, and put it back the way it was. Always be using symbols. Make symbols great again. This magic string thing pervades our Django support. So if I went to later on in the file, if I went to static URL dirs here, this is actually, what is this thing? It's a Python path. Always be using Python paths, one of the greatest libraries. Nafil, you did a path lib.
Yeah.
What does this package do a long time ago, right?
Yeah, pathlib is really great. It's basically paths for dummies, so it works.
So in this case, I've got a static top level directory, and we know that you made a mistake. We could even, we could even go up to this and do something like navigate to it because we think it's a symbol. And all the same things I just said, if I go to this side this time, refactor rename here, it fixes the symbol, and then anything that uses it. And this is actually a big deal in Django because you'll see static all over the place in templates and things that need to use it. One more little thing on this about general stuff in Django URL patterns. So I will jump to URL patterns. You're starting to see a pattern I'm doing, no pun intended, but I love symbols and jumping to symbols. So I'm sitting in URL patterns here, and I see that there is this string home URLs. I jumped to the module for that, even though it was in the middle of a string. And that was pretty cool. I can go back to where I was on that. I could go, for example, to API.urls. I got the wrong one. I'll go to this one. And then I can go to say hello and say, find me the usages of it, because I want to find where this route definition was. This is the view. I want to get back to the route. And that's where the route is. Yeah, I can jump right to it. Right back to where I was. And then all these same things apply about refactor rename and symbols and squigglies and stuff like that. So that's a little riff on symbols and red squigglies and paths. We'll pause there. Either of you got anything?
Just one thing, Paul. It's not like you need to know a specific shortcut all the time to use symbols. So if you hit shift quickly, that'll open up your search everything, and you can tab to different things. So Paul, if you could show that, like.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah. So if you hit tab now, you go to classes, files, symbols, actions, Git. So
we
you
can
don't
even
actually
look at
yeah, you don't actually have to remember that many shortcuts.
Paul, I got another one for you. Very, very closely related to that. If you hit shift,
okay,
I just delete that symbol. Delete what you got typed there? That's also a really fantastic way to just say like recent files. I use that all the time. Like I want to go back to 4 or 5 files. I just hit shift and like there's the recent files I've been editing because I'm working on a project that's got 4 or 5 different files. I'm like, which one was that? That's the one, right? So as long as there's nothing in the text, that's sort of what I use it for most. But also I think it's great to find all the symbols and the actions and stuff.
Yep, search everywhere is I think most of the advocates not named Paul really use search everywhere as their entrance into all of this intelligence stuff. I think you can even do, you can do math.
Truth is, I don't even know any shortcuts other than that. Like I used, like, I know Command E, but like other than that, I've forgotten everything else because it's so convenient.
Yeah.
Okay, for this next, actually, before I go on, do you see any comments or any questions in the chat?
There's just one question that I think needs to be addressed, which is like, is there an easy way to create files? And
yeah.
it is like you can just quickly show that it's very
Yeah,
easy.
what I do, because I leave the files tool turned off. If in this app I want to create something, I pop up the navigation bar and I hit new file. And it will create a file there. If I want it to be one level up and one level down and one level down, and then I make a file. If you want to make a file and you're a level up, you could say holes/foo.py and put the path separator in there, and it will make intermediate directories if it needs to.
Oh, nice.
That answered the question, Nafil?
Yeah, I think it did more than answer the question.
Right.
Hey, Paul, one more. Ricardo has a cool recommendation. Hit Command E. There you go. That might be better than my recommendation even.
Yeah. The recent files is probably one of my top 2 or top 3 for
Want to
getting
see
these
something?
things. Now,
Want to see
this is
something
one I
really
don't
cool?
usually use to narrow the list to things instead of things I visited recently, things I've actually changed. Yeah, Nafil?
So open your recent files, press Command E, and press Shift Enter. There you go. You open it on the side panel. So it's very, very useful. I do that a lot. It's kind of like my one-party trick.
Okay. Because I do test-driven development and I keep my code on the left and my test on the right, I'm constantly splitting and then going to the split and opening the test file. So you just saved me 2 operations. Thanks.
That is nice.
Okay. For this next segment, Nafil and I are going to pair program a little bit together. So I invited Nafil and pasted into Slack an invitation for something we call Code with Me. And the way I did that was I went here and I started a session. And when I start a session, I can do things like assign permissions to the session to say what they're allowed to do. And I can also refine them a little bit. But with this, I can also do a video and voice and chat call in a panel beside it. I won't show that today. You can even do screen sharing to augment for some things that might not fit inside the IDE window, like sharing a browser. So Nafil's like, okay, cool, we'll do this. All right, Nafil, you in? It says yes, joined. And what I want to do, Nafil, I want you and me to show this next one. I'm going to go to the sample function, which is a simple view. And I'm going to collapse it. And we're going to show speeding up the process of autocomplete and import. You don't have to type imports yourself. So Nafil, could you type REND and then control space?
Yep, just did that.
Yep. And so you see, and this is my hands up here, Nafil did that. What he saw on his screen, you and I are both putting it back. All right, cool. I'll put it back. What happened was he did this and he controlled space and he got the very first, because we do context specific results, he got render. And look at the watch at the top of the screen when I do this. We autocomplete the symbol and we generate the imports for you, and we put it in the right place, sorted. On that point, I'll do a quick tip. Reverse. You see reverse gives a warning. It's unused. Here's one I do a trillion times a day. optimize imports. So I don't have to stop what I'm doing, go to the top, get rid of things that are unused, and then resort them. Okay, Nafil, that was cool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to follow you.
Okay.
And
by the way, we're doing all of this live. There's no magic. It's
yeah.
You see what you get.
Can you jump to the symbol detail view, capital D, capital V?
Sure. Yep.
And in here, can you delete that line or comment out the line for model? And then open a new line and start typing MOD. Okay. Hit enter. And then put QE for question. And so the point here is, one, that's pretty freaking cool. He's doing the type and it's appearing on my screen. Oh my God. And because I was following him, I got the autocomplete on my side. I got to see those little pop-ups and things. That's a nice little touch.
Paul, you even got your presentation assistant popping up for when he was
I didn't notice that. You're right. You're right. It's an IDE platform. Everything fits well together. Because this is generic detail view, there are certain class attributes that are known, and we auto-completed them for you. So that was a nice thing. Nafil, I'm going to open the project view and go to the templates for polls. And could you change make a mistake and say details on the template?
I'm going to open. All right.
No. Go back to the view.
Oh yes,
and
yes.
On the next line, just put S.
Done.
And then when I mouse over it, I see the same kind of warning. We know that this string, it's just a string in Python, but when it's a template name on a detail view, it should be pointed to something inside this Django app that is a path to a valid thing. And go ahead and hit delete. What we could show is the whole refactor rename that we showed you a few times before. You can go to either side, the usage or the file name, and get rid of it. Now, scroll down a little bit enough. Wait, no, is it down or up? Let me see. Get under. Yeah, okay. On this one, let's talk about this one a little bit, Nafil. This assignment, if you look at it, our code inference is telling you it's of type question, capital Q question. But how did that function know it was a question? Now, Nafil, could you navigate into that symbol, into get object 404?
Are you still following me?
Oh, sorry. As soon as I start, that's my mistake for typing. Okay. And this is in the Django code. There's nothing in there. There's no type hint on this function that says return a type var of the first argument. So let's look down a little further. Nafil, do you see anything down below that looks like, return query set splat args in the try except, but I don't know if there's any typing really for that. Right?
Nope. There's a lot of args and dunders here. So
you can hand it anything and it'll give you anything else. So can you go back to where we started? I guess what this means, Nafil, is this is just something we did in our Django support. We know that there's this function called getObject404, and the type of the first argument will be the type of the result. That's my guess.
Exactly. That's what we did.
Yep. Michael, do you have any comment on this? Did you see anything in there that looked? You're the type person from C#.
I love types. Oh my gosh, I love them so much for Python. This is one of those places where all the work that you all have done to say, look, here's a thing that kind of breaks Python typing. And yet it's with a little bit of understanding, a little bit of an algorithm. Like we know that this is going to return a question, an optional question, basically. Another place where that comes up would be like SQL Alchemy.
Yes.
You know, a lot of those places that are dynamically generated, they're so frustrating to work with because the API is fairly complicated, and you like pull up the signature and it says *arg *KWArgs. You're like, well, that tells me I got a research project instead of like, you know, connection string. Is it con string or connection string? I don't know, but I got to go searching around now, right? Like that kind of stuff is frustrating. And so I just really appreciate that there's like this second layer of understanding of the structure here.
Yeah, Python metaprogramming magic is great unless you're a static analysis tool. Where can this help? Nafil, can you go to selected choice and replace choice under set?
Selected choice,
lines,
choice
2 lines,
under.
yeah, right. And see the autocomplete on it. So there you go. Because we knew it was a question, we could help you autocomplete on this stuff. What we'll see in a second is that extends into templates. So let's pause there before we get into templates, before we leave views. Got anything from either yourselves or from the chat?
Well, Andre dropped by. He says hello.
Our Andre?
Our Andre Vlasovskih, yeah. He said hello, and let me just see, because I was with you. There is a question about, does PyCharm have graphing support? And yes, PyCharm does have graphing support. We also have a specific IDE just for data scientists. So if you want to check that out, you can check that out.
If by graphing you mean models.
Matplotlib. Yep.
Yeah, I did cover that in the one from 2.5 years ago, the kind of the UML diagram. There's a different kind of graph. Michael Kennedy just yesterday dropped a really cool video on profiling. Now, it was for a pyramid app, but the process he went through of, I'll look at this, too much information, get a little in there, still too much information. Okay, now I'm on the right spot, was really worth watching. So maybe, Michael, if you get a chance in a second, could you paste a link to that video?
I can put it in private chat, and you guys got to move it over because it won't let me. Like YouTube blocks all the links unless you're the organizer. But I'll get it to you. I'll get it over there.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I mean, those are fun tools. Yeah.
There's this one question that I think is really important. I think Alfis was asking, can the guy, as in me, can they see the website when it's running? And the answer is yes, because we have port forwarding. So if Paul is running a Django app and he has port forwarding turned on in Code With Me, I can also see it on my computer.
Yep. If you tried Code With Me a few years, like 6 months ago, it didn't have it then, or maybe 9 months ago. So that is a big improvement. I will also just do a quick shout out. Maybe I should have done this before. Quick shout out to some other things we have related to this. Instead of me sharing my PyCharm, my Django with Nafil, we could have moved it to the cloud and then run our desktop thin client called Gateway, which would use the CPU, memory, disk over there. And we would both be connected to it. And we could disconnect, go to another computer, connect, and we'd be right back where we were. Gateway is really fascinating. We have a relationship with Gitpod for this. And then just last week, Google announced Google Cloud collaboration with us about this. So that stuff's all pretty cool. All right, I will go on to templates unless you think that we've got another thing.
I just want to add, and I feel, could you migrate that link from private chat to comments that I did for the audience? Because the question
might be in me.
You might not. Yeah. All right.
I don't see it anywhere.
I got it. I hope I got it.
Paul, are you going to talk about that HTML5 icon on the left?
Yes, that is the exact next thing I'm going to click.
All right. I don't want that to go by. That's one of my favorite features.
Yeah. So I'm pasting now the link to Michael's video on profiling in PyCharm and the little graphical view that lets you zoom in and find your hotspots and navigate to code.
I love it.
Okay, here we go. We're going to talk. We were on views. Let's talk about templates because people spend a lot of their time in templates when they're doing Django development. Can we bring some of this code intelligence, some of these features to the template side, we've been doing Django for a very long time. So we've gotten pretty good at it. I'm in list view and I want to go to the template for list view. So I can click on this symbol. Oh, I want to go back. Oh, I want to go forward. So that is a convenient way to jump between a view and a template. When I'm sitting inside this template, some of those things that we have already grown to love appear. If I make a typo, it knows I made a mistake. All those things about refactor, rename, and stuff like that, if I want to navigate to it, I can. I should give a shout out, PyCharm Professional, which gives us all of this Django support, bundles WebStorm, which we'll see in a second, and bundles Data Grip, which we'll see in a second. And it has code intelligence on freaking CSS selectors. I can jump back and forth and refactor, rename my CSS selectors. So I'm sitting in here and I've got this static thing and I can do autocomplete to help me write faster on all these things and get it right the first time and stuff like that. I can refactor, rename, and undo. And then I get model intelligence. So for example, latest question. What is that? Well, that's what that is. I can navigate to it. So this class-based view has says this is what the context is from here. I want this to be bound to that. And so that's my context. And I know it is because I can do things like autocomplete. Yay, woo. That's pretty cool. This one is just, Nafiel's already sitting on top of this one. Nafiel's like, hey, go ahead and talk about this one. I can autocomplete my routes to generate URLs. And if I wanted to like navigate to that route, why, yes, I can, and I make a mistake there. Refactor, rename. I wonder if I think I was on the wrong one. Giving coding assistance on things like this. These are places where you make mistakes a lot. You have to stop what you're doing and go open your file, open your directory, open your file, find the name of the route, go back and fix it. And so giving coding assistance for the autocomplete on things like that are really helpful. So that's a little bit of the type inference in templates before we go into our hopefully 3 awesome parts about extra things. Do we have any points to add or any questions?
Maybe just a quick pointer to people who are not super familiar with Django. This thing about this polls call in detail, that doesn't look like a regular URL, but you can name your URLs in case you want to change the actual structure throughout your project. Say like /account, I want to change it to /user. You don't have to rewrite all your things. This integration with those magic strings is pretty cool.
And here's where it comes from. There's kind of segmentation and partitioning of your route space. And so in the polls app, there's a route named detail. And those two things combine here to be an argument to the URL tag helper. All right, Nafu, you got anything?
No, all I'll say is that as a rule of thumb, just try hitting go to declaration or command B pretty much anywhere, and it should work most of the time.
Yes.
That's how I learn new code bases.
Yeah. Another way, if you're really unsure and if you're in like full exploration mode, Paul, if you just hold down command and just mouse over things.
Oh,
everything
right.
Everything that becomes a hyperlink is something you can navigate to, right?
Indeed.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Everything that's a symbol. Yep. Okay, I'm going to go into stuff that not enough people know about in PyCharm Professional that can really have a positive impact on Django projects. I'll start with WebStorm. I'm also the advocate for WebStorm, and it's bundled And it is so powerful, not just on JavaScript, but on HTML and even CSS. So for example, this is my main template, and I'm linking to a style sheet from Bootstrap. And it helpfully says, hey, if you download that, we can index it. If we index it, we can autocomplete it. Would you like us to download it for you? Why, yes. Thank you, PyCharm. I'd love for you to download that for me. Then the warning goes away. What did that give me? It gave me autocomplete on things like BG dark, BG danger, BG warning, all of my symbols in CSS.
Paul,
And
that's
that's
super
a
cool.
nice
Normally you
and
get
pretty
that
cool
in.
thing. And that applies not just to CSS, but to HTML, the connection between the two, JavaScript, modern things like Tailwind, all that other kind of stuff. Now, if you're writing some API stuff, so I installed Django Ninja, didn't do anything all that exciting. I've got a single endpoint called questions. If I wanted to poke around at this, I could fire up the server. I could, and I'll go ahead and do that. I'll fire up the server so it's running down below. And I could do, I think, Michael, I think you like Postman. A lot of people like Postman. I could go to a browser, for example, and go to /API/questions. You can see my JSON response. I ain't got time for that. Switching back and forth between this tool, that tool, the other tool. My fingers know how to work in PyCharm. So what I could do instead is do something called an HTTP request file. I'm going to call it questions, and it makes a file questions.html. As if by magic. Oh, I'll do the whole thing. Questions. It makes a .http file, which can be version controlled. And what I can do is, like we have live templates, and we have live templates for this as well. And the live template I want for this one is get request. So I want this, and then I want API/questions. Why, yes, I do want application.json. Thanks for asking. And now I can run this, and I can see the output right here in the middle of my IDE, and then go, and I want to fiddle with the API. Well, I'll just go back over there, and I can return more than 5 or less than 5. I'll just return 1, go back to where I just was. Actually, I don't have to. I can just rerun the last thing. Nope, it remembered. I can go back here, rerun this again. And I only get 1 output. I can also combine this with yes, and run Django under the debugger. And now when I go and issue a request to that endpoint, I will stop there. And I could do something like, why am I only getting 1 result? God, I don't know. I've clearly lost the plot on this. And I can select it. I can evaluate this expression at that point in the execution and see the result and be like, oh yeah, because I only asked for 1 thing. That's why I'm only getting 1 thing. I only asked for 1 thing. What if I asked for 2 things? Oh yeah, there it is. There's the other question. So that's really helpful. But what if I wanted to debug a template? So for that, I will go back to, let's see, my views. Sure. I'll go to my views. This is the list view, and it's doing this stuff. And so I want to set a breakpoint right there. No, I'm sorry. Oh yeah, I'll set a breakpoint there. And I will go back to my questions HTTP, and this time I'm going to do a get request. And I'm going to go to polls/index. So for this, I want text HTML. All right. And I'm still running in debug mode, and I will run this. Oop. I wonder if I'm in the. Oh, well.
Is the URL maybe just /polls?
I think you're right. Okay, so I will go back to running Django in debug mode, and you're saying it should be that?
I'm theorizing it should be that.
Okay. There you go. Thank you, Michael. So I stop at this point and I'm like, okay, sure. But where I really wanted to stop was there. Okay. And now I'm going to resume program. And there I am. I'm in the questions list. And I see the question that I'm sitting on. And as I go through this, the question updates. And I can debug right in the middle of a template. That's pretty cool. So I will get that out of the way, and I'll come down to our database tool. What I'll do is I will, in the very beginning, it offered me to do the step that I'm about to do. I can drag and drop this SQLite file. And it's going to ask me, hey, you know, there's a JDBC driver you might need. You want us to download it for you? Sure. Thanks for the convenience. You want us to test and make sure it works? Yeah. Thanks for the convenience. And when I get that out of the way, oh, look, it still thinks I'm talking to Nafil. That's cool. I can go browse my tables, do an update. I will go to polls questions, and I'll say, I'll go to this one, and I'll say, pourquoi? And then I will save it. And when I come back to here, you see that I was updated by editing a database graphically rather than having to go and drop some data and reload some data and stuff like that. One last thing I'll show, and then we will do some questions as wrap up, is integrated test support. Saved it for last because it's my favorite. If I go to some tests, and I'll move this out of the way, I can run these tests in the integrated testing tool. If I do something that messes them up and I want to run just this one test, I can run just this one test and it will tell me I messed that up. I might be wondering, why is it messed up? So I will set a breakpoint and I will run this test under the debugger. And I'll go to the breakpoint that I was at before, and that's cool. And I will go to the breakpoint I just set in the test. And if I wanted to, I could go back up the stack and find things that called me looking for the problem. I find this mode of development with my, I feel if I obeyed what you just said, I wouldn't be doing this right now.
Wait, what did I just say?
About speeding up the process of arranging things side by side. I have my code on the left, I have my test on the right, I have my test runner at the bottom, and I am super productive. I never switch over to the browser going and looking and reloading and stuff like that. Especially with the ability to set a breakpoint and run a test under the debugger, I can stop right on top of something and poke around. That is all the tips I'm showing for today. Nafil, what did I say my superpower was? It's 12 o'clock.
Yeah, you finished right on time. There's just one question.
What questions do we have or comments from the two of you before we get into wrap-up mode?
So there was this one question about live templates. Where do they work? They work everywhere. So we have live templates for just about everything.
Here are the ones we ship. You can write your own.
Yep. I got one, Paul. How about new Git stuff? I mean, I don't know what counts as new from the question, like what's the starting point, but I thought the GitHub and the PR features were amazing.
Let's see. This repo isn't tied to something from Git, so I'm not.
Yeah.
I agree
But
with
you can
you.
now see your PRs, and you can check them out just like by pressing a button right locally and try them. It's fantastic.
Yep, you can do code reviews in the IDE. You can add comments. You can do all that stuff. You're right. That is fantastic. That's deserving of its own webinar.
It really is, honestly.
All right, we will go ahead and switch to, let's see. Okay, yeah. By the way, I did a Git webinar, Django-in-PyCharm webinar last month, I believe, month before. 10 power tips for Git in PyCharm. That was a lot of fun. We'll go ahead and switch back over to my slides. That's a whirlwind tour. We look at some closing comments, starting with you, Michael. You make your living teaching people tools and technologies. Do you think there's a market for people who want to master their tools?
Absolutely. I think it's a huge one. Naful as well has a PyCharm book, and I have a PyCharm course, which is fantastic. A lot of the, this applies to other tools as well, like just straight up profiling and other things. But so much of this is, and you saw this reflected throughout the comments, is an awareness thing, right? It's super hard to understand that if you were to go into the live templates in your thing and figure, oh, here's how I create my own. No, it's not hard, but why would you think you could, right? Why would you think you could extend the autocomplete, right? And people who took my course are like, wow, I was only using 20% of PyCharm. This is so much better. And it's not just, just an education thing. It's like a joy. When you sit down and you work with tools that you really understand and you really love, it's like, I get to work on this. I don't have to work on this. And it's just, yeah, I think there's a lot of interest and value in that.
And that's such a good point. I think beginners are rushing to complete their task. And as you become intermediate and professional developer, you make time to master your tools, to evaluate your tools, try new tools and things like that. Nafi, I'll come to you in a second. I just wanted to point out our great friend Andre just made a point in the chat a few minutes ago about if you use gRPC instead of HTTP, there's a very good protocol buffers plugin for that HTTP request file. Nafi, what's your take on, we've been doing this PyCharm Django thing for a long time.
Indeed, we have. Yeah.
What's the case you would make to someone to take time to watch something like this, to read up, to watch the stuff you've done? What's the case you would make for why people should spend the time to get better at using their tool for Django?
I think the best way that I would characterize it is that it reduces your frustration quite a bit. So when you know how something works and how it's supposed to work, and you can take advantage of the tools, it feels like you're flying. It's like, you're in charge, you're in control, you can go anywhere, you can do anything. You're freaking Superman. So it's not just, you'll be more productive, you also feel great. And I think it's that feeling that I think is valuable.
I agree completely. I have a feeling like that when I am doing testing, when I do test first, not to eat my vegetables. I do it because it feels like I'm flying. I'm really in the flow and my tool is helping me. And it's a really good mode of development rather than that kind of desperate hack and print statement and all that other stuff. Okay, we'll go ahead and wrap up. If you'd like more information on PyCharm, please go to our website at jetbrains.com/PyCharm. Lots of good stuff happening these days. Just saying. If you haven't checked out our blog, check out our blog, blog.jetbrains.com/PyCharm. getting information, news, and releases. We're getting into release season, so lots of good stuff coming out in the next couple of weeks, as well as educational resources such as this webinar. You don't want to miss a chance for Nafil and I to roll in people like Michael and really help us set the scene and paint the picture. We'd love your feedback on this webinar. We actually read it, so please feel free to contact us on Twitter afterwards, or if you registered, fill in that survey. Every single time, as soon as it comes in, we go through it and look for things we should have done better. That's it for us today. Nafil, any closing words?
No, I think you did it best, Paul. There's enough said.
Michael, got anything?
Thanks for having me. Learn the tools, right? Like you can just be so effective, and there's a ton of little gems that we don't know are hiding underneath some keystroke or some window that we haven't opened.
Thanks a lot for joining us. We'll get back in touch with people about the giveaway. Everybody, enjoy your day. Thanks for joining.
Bye.